Hope is here. The way to break free with your host, Angela Pedigo, will light a flame within you. Host Angela Pedigo is an author, speaker, and certified life recovery, grief, and joy restoration coach. Angela uses her own life experiences to help you navigate and guide you to success. She also has developed tools that incorporate her faith and her drive to overcome any obstacle in life. So please welcome the host of The Way to Break Free, Angela Pedigo.
Welcome, everybody, to The Way to Break Free. I am your host, Angie Pedigo. I'm so excited today to have somebody very dear to my heart. Deserae Brown is with us today. And this girl, let me tell you, she's amazing. I've gotten to watch a lot of her story just unfold right before my eyes. So, but it's rather than me tell it, I'm going to let her tell it. So, Deserae, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So, tell them a little bit about you.
My name's Deserae. I have 3 children. One's fixing to be 16, my oldest girl. I have a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl.
You got enough distance between all of them. It's not too much at one time. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Deserae actually is celebrating 2.5 years in recovery
On the 6th.
On the 6th coming up. So that is so awesome, and I cannot wait for her to share how she did that today, and where God was when kind of thing. So Deserae, just take it away. Tell us how where this all started.
Most of my childhood, I didn't have a horrible childhood. It wasn't like some people have a really bad childhood. My dad was an alcoholic addict. He was in the military, so he was gone the first 8 years. And my stepdad was an alcoholic. So I dealt with addiction and alcoholism through my childhood. When I was probably I guess I was probably in elementary school. I was molested by a family member. And I always got in trouble for stuff. Like, it could be something little and I could get in trouble for it. Not eating everything on my plate and that was because my stepdad was an alcoholic. So the family member had told me, if you try to tell on me, then I'm going to tell that you done it. It was all your fault, and would turn it around and blame it on me. And at that age, I didn't know any difference. And so I never said anything. I just pushed it down and let it go away pretty much. And my stepdad we moved around a couple times, not much. We stayed in the county. I still never said anything about it. He finally got sober. He was sober for 6 weeks, and he had a motorcycle wreck and died. I was 11, I think, at the time. And at that point, that's where I had been to church some on and off growing up, but not like an everyday going to church thing. But that was when my shift in knowing who God was and not liking God. That was when I become angry at God. And I started, Mom dealt with it in her own way. Of course, she was raising 2 kids, and if she would go out, and we used to have like alcohol in the house just for like if you got sick, back in the old days, you would take a shot and it would cure your cold. I got to where I would drink if Mom was gone, or even if I was at a friend's house, we would drink. So I started drinking at a younger age than I should have.
Can I ask a question? So did the anger set in toward God when he passed away?
Because we had built a better relationship. Like, my dad, even after he was in the military, and when he come out of the military, he was there, but he wasn't. He stayed in jail a lot. And that was a big thing for me. Like, there was one weekend that my dad was supposed to come get me, and this was the first time I ever felt like really that my stepdad was my dad. my dad was supposed to be coming to get me for the weekend, and my dad's best friend, which I called him my uncle, had called my mom and stepdad and asked them if I was with my daddy. And they told him no and wanted to know why, that he was supposed to be on the way to get me, and he had been involved in a hit and run, whatever. I don't know, it was something major. So my stepdad took me out, just me, took me to the store, riding in his old little car, fishtailing on the gravel road, just having some father-daughter time. And after that, that's when he become more like my dad. And
You feel like he stepped up in,
yeah.
in a role in that moment?
And after that, he was my dad to me. My dad he ended up, I think he went to jail a little bit later. And then when we moved from the house we were living in then, they had bought a house, put it on some land, and we hadn't been out there a few months, and he died. And I was just angry that God had took my dad away from me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd finally got that father-daughter relationship, and then he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a great relationship to begin with. There was things that made me mad because of his alcohol. And things where I felt like he treated me different than he did my sister, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, now that I'm older, I see that it really wasn't. She was just younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
so she didn't get the brunt of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
When he passed away, and I just felt like God was punishing me for something, and I was just angry.
And you were 11.
Yeah.
That's some big emotions for a 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then because he had just got sober, and so I was getting the sober side of him, and then he passes away. And then my dad was in jail, that he was in jail when my stepdad died. Mm-hmm. And I do remember the jail that he was in, let him come to the funeral. Like they brought him to the funeral home to be with me or whatever during some time of the funeral. Mm-hmm. And then, so I started hanging out with people, just like normal kids do, started drinking. As I got on up a few years, I started smoking weed. That was my way to escape reality. And then we started going to church, and I quit doing all that. I wasn't doing it as much. We were in church all the time. Doing Bible studies, that's when I really got to know who God was, but I was still resentful towards him at the same time. Mm-hmm. I did let go of my resentments and stuff enough I was trying to be who I was supposed to be, and I got saved, joined the church. I was trying to be the kid I was supposed to be, but deep down I still held all of these resentments.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that getting saved part. What was that to you? Because I think a lot of people sometimes don't. They're looking for that experience and they don't know what that is.
My experience with that is, okay, so I was saved at school. Mm-hmm. In the back of the most boring class that I had in 6th grade. Like we were in revival that week, and I had got really convicted one night during revival, and the next day, I can still remember it. One of my cousins was like, "Why do you just look like you're so mad today? You're so upset." He'd said something to the fact of me looking like I felt like crap.
Yeah.
And my other cousin that we went to church with, he was there with me, and he said, "She's lost. Leave her alone. She was on the altar last night." Aww. So, that was, and that's one little memory, I grew up with a bunch of boys as cousins. there wasn't a lot of us girls. So, they were kind of, he was like, "Oh, okay, I'm so sorry." And, but like then we were in the lunch line going to lunch that day. And I was like 6th grade, I think. And I just got that. Normally my 6th period class, I would go to sleep. I just sit in the back, lay my head down and go to sleep because it was such a boring class. It was like social studies or something. I hated that class, whatever. And that day I laid my head down, but I wasn't sleeping. And then I told my mom about it when I got home. Aww. I mean, it was just a piece that I knew. It's when you know,
Yeah.
You know, I knew that it didn't matter what I done, what kind of resentments I held, what happened in life. I knew where I was going.
Mm.
And I probably should have held on to that a lot better than I did. But I got into my worldly ways. I went to high school. In high school, I played softball. My mom had remarried. Um, I played softball with my aunt, with my stepdad, my new stepdad's sister. So I stayed busy most of the time, but then like my sophomore year, really when I got my license, I started drinking and partying a little bit more. If I go out on weekends, even if I had a curfew because you know, mom and my stepdad didn't want me drinking or going out and partying and doing something to get in trouble, but I'd just do it before I come home. You know, I thought I was being smart about it.
Thinking nobody knows what they do.
And it really didn't escalate until after I graduated. After I graduated high school, I mean, I done good through school. I smoked weed every now and then, drank a little bit, but nothing major. Once I graduated and moved out, I was heavily drinking.
So was all of the stuff just building up inside?
Yeah, I think so. I just never dealt with anything. I didn't want to feel nothing. That was why I used alcohol and drugs. Like, I didn't want to have to deal with any type of feeling, whether it be sadness, anger. It got to the point where it was happiness. You know, if I was just super excited, it was a reason to celebrate. Go get drunk to celebrate. And so after I graduated and moved out, I started drinking a lot. It got to the point where as soon as I got up in the morning, I was drinking. And at that time, that's all I really done. I was just drinking and drinking a lot, partying a lot. And then I found out I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. I quit drinking, quit drugging, didn't do nothing while I was pregnant with her. And then she was born in 2009. And I loved being a mom. Aww. You know, that was I had moved back home with my mom.
How old
and
were
stepdad.
you?
I was 20.
20.
I'd moved back home, had her, you know, that was the lot of my life. And then after a few years, me and her dad had got engaged. And I think we were engaged at this time because we were off and on for a long time. But we moved in together, and that's when I started using pills. I had messed my neck up. I've got some problems in my neck, and I started going to the doctor, and they put me on pain medicine. And that's when I really started to abuse my pain pills. And she was probably 3-year-old. So we lived together. We ended up splitting up, and me and her stayed at the house or the little trailer we were renting. And I continued to go into my addiction a little bit heavier. Then I met my first husband. I didn't really use a lot. I just abused my pain pills more than I was taking them more than I was supposed to. Me and him got married. We moved in together. Within a year, we were filing for divorce. It was like a year later, I think, we filed for divorce and we split up. And that's when I really went downhill.
So now there's a lot more emotions.
Yeah.
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 You just feel like they were just all kind of making this big pile.
Yeah. They were just all building on to each other. And when I would take my medication, whether I took it the right way or whether I finally learned that I could snort pills. And then that took me to a whole nother level. Because it hit me faster.
We're going to pause right there and we'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
We're back from the break. Deserae, you were talking about, as we were on the break, I was thinking about this. You were talking about how, there's wounds as a child. There's emotional, when I say wounds, there's emotional wounds as a child that you just had to hold and stuff down. And then those things start easily. A lot of times people will say, oh, well, alcohol wasn't my problem or whatever the case may be. But it starts there generally because it's whatever the introduction is to numbing those feelings that you don't know, either don't know how to deal with. A lot of times we're too young to know how to deal with them. And then all of a sudden there's this something, whatever the something is, that numbs. Did you feel like each time we went from like the alcohol, then to the pot, then to the pain pills, then the storing the pain pills, like there was a greater numbing effect each time?
Yes.
So that's why it kept building?
Yeah. When I started snorting the pain pills, that was when I really started getting worse off. Because I realized that they would hit me quicker and I would not feel things as much. So I started using more of them. And
did they wear off quicker?
Eventually they did. I built up a tolerance to them. So I was having to use more and more and more. And then I got with my second husband. Before I got with him, my dad passed away in 2016. Me and my oldest daughter's dad had got back together. My dad had done 20 something months in a county jail and he finally got sober. Not fully sober, but it was better. Like my dad went to prison for being a habitual DUI offender, So, and he was drinking, but just every now and then. It wasn't like it used to be, and me and him started rebuilding our relationship. And I was working in Gallatin at that time. And like he worked third shift and I worked first shift. So on my way home from work every day, I would call him and talk to him the whole way from Gallatin to Rebolin. And then he passed away just suddenly. He had pretty much a heart attack. And
so you're almost reliving the same experience you had with your stepdad.
Yeah.
Wow. And how old were you then?
It was in 2016. So it's been almost 10 years ago. So I was 25.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had my son yet.
How'd that affect you when that happened?
That was my big turning point. I got a life insurance policy back, and when I done that, because I talked to him every day on my way home, and I never had that relationship with him. So when I lost him, I didn't have that connection anymore at all. And I'm an only child with him. So, I had to, well, even through the funeral, I couldn't tell you much about the funeral because I stayed so high. Like, I just didn't want to feel anything at all. And after I got the insurance money back, I got a few little things. There's a couple of little things that I got that I still have. Like, my daughter was in kindergarten, I think, or first grade. I want to think it was kindergarten. And they had like a fall festival. And like, they made this bench and painted it, and all the kids from her class had signed it.
Oh.
And they lacquered it and all that stuff. Well, I bid until I got it. And she still has it at her grandparents' house. So, that's really the only thing I have from my daddy's passing that I use that money on that I still have, or that she has. The rest of it, I blowed on pills. I quit my job. I just really started into my addiction. Me and her dad split up again. I got with a new guy and stayed high all the time. Then I found out I was pregnant with my little boy. And me and him got married. I used through my pregnancy with him. I was just on pills, but it was still enough to not worry about. I would get clean before I went to my doctor's appointments, just enough so I could pass a drug test if they drug tested me. I had him. He come a month early. I was high risk with him because he has one of his kidneys. He has cyst on. It was multicystic, something like that. And so once I had him, and I still blame myself for it because I feel like it was probably my addiction that made him that way. He only has one functioning kidney, which it functions just perfect. It takes up for the one that doesn't function. The other one's shrinking away. But I still feel like that's part, now that I'm sober and I think about the things that I've done through my pregnancies, I feel like, maybe if I wouldn't have been using, that wouldn't have happened. But I can't go back and change it. And, which he's 7 now. He's doing great. He's a brat. I know he deals with a lot because me and his dad both are addicts. And I don't know if his dad's in recovery. I hope he is, but I know he doesn't have a lot to do with him. I know how bad it hurt me with my dad, and where he was in jail all the time and this and that. And so I know how my kids are feeling.
I'm sitting here thinking this is a prime example of how things repeat generationally, right? I mean, like, you experienced it, and then we live out what we're shown a lot of times, but I mean, not all the time, you know what I'm saying, until somebody decides to be that transition person, which we'll talk about that in a minute, but go ahead.
So I guess it was after my son was born, I had started we were still using pills. And that's when I met heroin. I had done meth a time or two, but I wasn't crazy about it. But we were pill sick and couldn't find any pills at that time because that was when they really started cracking down on them. And a buddy of ours was like, well, I've got some heroin you can try. He was like, he told us to do very little, blah, 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 blah. And that was all it took. We said we weren't going to get hooked on heroin, but it was cheaper for us to do it because it lasted a little bit longer than the pills, and the pills were so expensive. And that was when my addiction with heroin started. I always said that pills were my drug of choice until I met heroin. And that was the truth. And really, I guess it was, now that I think back on it, it was just anything that got me out of the state of mind I was in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we done heroin for, I don't know, a long time. And then his dad had went to jail. And I had decided I didn't want to do heroin no more. And a buddy was like, well, if you do meth, it'll, get you through the withdrawals. And I was like, okay, because that was the biggest thing with opiates. The withdrawals from it are so horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, you won't have the withdrawals as bad, da, da, da. And I was like, okay, that's all right. And then I just started doing meth.
So you got hooked on meth from
Yeah.
that.
I done it just very little it was just like once every day. And then it got to where it was all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Me and his dad had split up, and I got with another guy eventually, and that's when I started IV using.
Mm-hmm.
Because my thing was, I could tell everybody else was higher than I was, and I was angry but jealous at the same time because I couldn't get as high as they were. And I'm like, there's got to be something different. And then finally, he was like, well, I'll be honest with you, I shoot it, da da da. So he has to shoot me because I can't do it myself. I love tattoos, but I'm scared to death of a needle.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how that works?
Yeah. So that's when I started my IV use. And once I started that, I got really bad. And like after my little boy's daddy had went to jail and I was living at the place I was living, it wasn't a place that he needed to be, which my oldest daughter, when me and my little boy's daddy got together, she stayed with her daddy's parents. Because I didn't want her, I knew that I was not in a place that she needed to be. And so she stayed with her grandparents, and because that was the best place for her. And I felt a lot of shame for that. And I think that's why I started using that, just added to the using, the reasons, the excuses to use. Because she deserved the mom that I was before addiction. And I couldn't be that. So I placed her where she had stability. She had what she needed. I knew she wouldn't be hungry. And then when I got pregnant with Brayson, my little boy, I was upset because she wasn't with me, but we were still using and she didn't need to be there. And then when his dad went to jail, my mom and stepdad filed for emergency custody because I didn't need him with me. And of course I signed, I just went to court without a lawyer and agreed to it because that was the best place for him. By the time we went to court, I was living in my vehicle. I was with the new guy, living in my vehicle on a creek bank. And, so I knew I wasn't anywhere near where I was supposed to be as a mother. And that just escalated my IV using a whole lot more. It was an abusive relationship. That was the first abusive relationship I'd ever been in, like really abusive. And that kept me from even trying to go see my kids. I didn't talk to my kids very often. I didn't go see them.
How, when you say that kept you from seeing them, like in what way?
Because I didn't want them to see the person I had become. Because I wasn't the old me. I was the broken down version of me. And I thought that was the worst version of me. But it wasn't. I thought I had hit rock bottom then, but I hadn't. We found out I was pregnant. And he went to jail on, I don't know, that year during Halloween. and we had both got sober. We had went to Kentucky and got sober. We went up there with his dad and them, got sober. We're sober for a couple of weeks and come back to Tennessee, and he went to jail.
We're going to pause right there, and we'll be right back after the break.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Deserae, before the break, you guys had went to Kentucky to get sober.
We got sober, come back. He went to jail in another county. And this is a part of my story that it took me until I really started working on myself I lied about it for a long time. I had started using again after he went to jail. I was living in a place that they used all the time, and if one of them walked by, they would just throw me a little bag of dope. I went to the doctor, and they couldn't find a heartbeat. And I was 21 weeks at that time. So I had miscarried, and we were setting up a D&E because I was so far along. They were going to have to go in and surgically remove her or whatever. It wasn't just like a normal D&C. I ended up, of course, after I found out for sure that I had miscarried, I went straight back to using a needle. That was when I learned how to shoot myself. I ended up, my back had been bothering me really bad one day, and I just thought it was because I'd been up for so long. And at like 1 o'clock that morning, I went to the bathroom and ended up passing her at home. Now, when I miscarried her, I was a week away from finding out what I was having. But like I went to the bathroom to pee, and she just come out, and it's what it was. I was going into labor, I guess.
For the back pain.
Yeah. And like, of course, I freak out. You know, that was when things started to really turn. Because not only had I miscarried because I had started using again, but to be at home and experience something like that, you know, this was my child, and it was a little girl. This was a child that I was supposed to protect like my other two, and I couldn't even carry her full term to protect her or to try to better myself and I went to the hospital. Well, the ambulance come, and they ended up, she had got too far down into the pipes in the toilet for them to be able to pull her out. So I never got to have any closure with that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's after I come back home from the hospital, that's when my addiction really started to take a toll. I didn't care about nothing, no one. I felt like my kids were, the two that I already had were better off without me. I felt like there was nothing in the world that could ease that pain, and I tried every which way to ease it. And then I ended up getting pregnant with my youngest one. And I didn't know I was pregnant with her until I was like 6 months pregnant, because I had miscarried and I just thought it was normal not to have a period. I found out I was pregnant with her. I started tapering down because I didn't want to just, where I was so far along, I didn't want to just quit cold turkey and then miscarry again. And I quit, and 4 days later, I went into labor a month and a half early. So when we went to the hospital, Mom come got me. I went to the hospital, had her. She tested positive. I tested positive. Her cord tested positive. So, of course, DCS come in. I never got to hold her at the hospital. After 2 days, I left. I had to leave. Of course, I was released from the hospital. She stayed at the hospital. My mom was the one that went to the hospital every day to feed her or do whatever, and I couldn't. And I done okay for about a week, because I was trying to get myself together and do what I was supposed to do. I was going to be, just figure out somewhere to go to, like a rehab or something. And then a buddy of mine come and pick me up, and we went back to their house and we got high. And from then on, after that, I jump started my addiction straight downhill. I was using heroin. I was using a needle. I was drinking from daylight to dark. Didn't know where I was going to sleep the next night. And didn't have a vehicle, didn't have a license, didn't have nothing. A friend of mine who's in recovery now took me to court a couple of times because I had some driving on suspendeds. Everything went good. They kept postponing it, and I thought I was going to be I had big court one day in December of 2020, and I thought, I'm going to go in here. My lawyer at the time was like, they're probably going to give you 6 months probation, county probation, whatever, for the driving charges. Okay. I get to court that morning, and my lawyer tells the judge that we're going to settle it with the DA after and come back after a break or whatever. And the judge says, in the meantime, don't we have a warrant for her arrest? And of course, my first thought is, I haven't done anything. And then I kept asking the court officer what it was for, because I had no clue. And he waited until we got to the other side of the door to the hallway, and he told me what my charges were. It was the attempted Haley's Law. They charged me with aggravated child abuse and neglect, where my daughter tested positive. So instead of getting 6 months county probation, I got 6 months of jail time with a felony charge. And even that didn't sober me up. I worked on myself some. Back then, things were different at the county jail. It was completely different. I didn't work on myself like I should have, but I tried. I just didn't want to deal with a lot of things that I should have dealt with. I got out. I done good for maybe a week. And then when I relapsed that time, I relapsed harder than I had ever relapsed. And I had started using meth again. I was using heroin. I was using fentanyl at that time. And that was one thing I was always scared of was fentanyl, because my sister's a recovering addict too. And I had seen her OD so many times. And like even that first jail stay, one of my best friends died from an overdose. And I still just didn't care. I had started working. I got a decent job at Baby Knoth in Red Bowling. Started working. I was still using. Of course, I wasn't letting them know that. I worked night shift, so it was easy for me to, not have to deal with bigger people, higher ups. One of my weekends off, me and my best friend at the time, he's like a brother to me, had been hanging out with some people. I had been doing heroin all weekend. And I had I had just a little bit left in the bag. And I had went to the bathroom. We were back at his house. And I went to the bathroom. I mean, it was like the dust in a bag. I had done fine the whole time I had been doing it. And I hadn't done it because I had worked that night before or whatever. And so I hadn't done none. So I do this. And I remember coming out, getting some pizza and a drink, sitting on the couch and talking to this girl was there. Didn't even know my brother had come up home, my best friend. And apparently I had got up and moved to the other side of the couch, the whole 9 yards. And he said I laid my head back and he thought I was going to sleep. And he said he heard this noise and it was a death gurgle. And like the only thing I remember taking a bite of pizza and having trouble getting it down, but that was the last thing I remember. And I was still on this side of the couch, not way over here. And like the next thing I know, when I come to, he is straddling me and had his hand reared back like he was fixing to hit me. Because they had done hit me with Narcan, started CPR. And it was the fear in his eyes, in his mom. His brother was there. The friends that I wouldn't have thought about. That's the fear. That was the first thing I seen. And I've never touched heroin again. That's what kept me from ever doing heroin again. Probably a week later, I went back to jail. I went to bond somebody out. Come to find out I had 2 warrants and didn't know him. Because like an idiot, when I got put out on state probation, I didn't stay clean long enough to go to my state intake. And I went to state intake dirty. So that violated me. And I done 2 months. It wasn't a big deal. Lost my job, got out, and 2 weeks after I got out, my job hired me back. And I was like, all right, I can do this. This means that I must be worth something. That was my thoughts. And I worked there for 6-7 months, I think. And I had pointed out, I had started seeing a new guy, stayed high all the time. I worked most of the time. And when I was at work, I'd done my job, but when I wasn't at work, I was getting high. And which in turn, where I was up for days, I would fall asleep and end up not going into work and pointing out, or wake up late, halfway through my shift and have to call in. After I lost my job, I spiraled again. And then at this time, I got to see my youngest daughter. It was the first time I'd ever got to see her.
Oh.
My oldest daughter was turning 13, and she wanted me at her birthday party. And that was the first time I ever got to see my youngest one. She was 2, I think. She may have been going on 2. She was fixing to be 2. And that was in June. I got to see her. In July, I lost my job. In August, I tried to falsify a drug test like an idiot because in our active addiction, we don't think about the things like that. Like we think, well, they don't care, da, da, da. So I ended up falsifying a drug test, catching another charge. I bonded out on that charge. Within a month, I was back in jail. And that time, I was glad I was going to jail. Mm-hmm. I needed it. I didn't want to be there, but I knew that if I was going to live, I needed to. Mm-hmm. Because I was on the verge of, even though I was doing meth, I thought I was, I'm okay. I'm still sober because I'm not doing my drug of choice. Mm. But I was getting to the point that I wouldn't have cared. Like I would have went out and used. Yeah. Another month on the streets and I'd have probably been using heroin again. Gotcha. I went to jail. I was on an 8-year sentence. I done violated once. The first time I violated, the judge showed me, he said, if you come back, bring your toothbrush. You're not leaving. Well, I had my hopes up that I was going to get to go to rehab, this and that. It was, everybody was rehabilitation before reincarceration, all mm-hmm. this. And then I go to court and I settled my little court stuff, which was my falsifying a drug test charge mm-hmm. for a year of county probation. And then I settled it before I went to big court in hopes that it would help me to be able to go to rehab. Mm-hmm. And we get in front of the judge, and he provokes me to serve. Does not even give me the option to go to rehab.
That was not what you were expecting.
No, it was not. And like if I'd have been on the streets, that would have been, something that drastic would have been a reason to get high. Mm-hmm. I done 26 months this time on an 8-year sentence. I come out on parole. But this time, while I was there, I got to work on myself with a bunch of the programs. Mm-hmm. I got a sponsor. I worked my steps. I worked the steps through another program. I was doing all these programs. They started a work release program. The work release program was through my old job at Baby Health. And I thought, there's no way they're hiring me back. They had seen me through my addiction. Some of them knew me before my addiction. Some of them just knew me through my addiction. So when we got to apply for the work release, I was like, yeah, they're not going to hire me. There's no way they're hiring me. And that's where I ended up getting to be one of the first females to go back to that workplace.
Nice.
And I've been out of jail since November, and I still work there.
Yes.
And I tell them all the time that they're going to have to walk me out if they ever try to fire me again. But there's so many people that support us in recovery there. Mm-hmm. And like a lot of people, there's people that don't like that place, whatever. But for a workplace to support us as much as they do through recovery.
Yes. And
there's a lot of us that are there that are in recovery, like it makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. When I got out in November, not only did I have my job, but I had money saved up, and I went into the Manual House, which is a transitional living in Lafayette. And I thought, because I've never tried to do a program. I've never been in a program. I was afraid it was going to be something horrible, like, just real strict. And I know some of them are, but this program has helped me more than I ever thought it would. between that and work and just doing the next right thing.
Mm-hmm.
I pay rent every week. I have a truck. I bought a truck. I have my license back.
Mm-hmm.
My youngest daughter that I caught the Haley's Law charge on, they put a order of protection in place when I signed my probation, and I've been to court and had that lifted.
Nice.
So now I'm allowed to be around her. I talk to her and my son every other day, every day if I can. Just depends on if mom has her phone turned up or not, or if the kids want to, not be brats and hang up on me the whole time. My oldest daughter still struggles a lot, but she went through everything with me.
Yeah.
She had me as a mom, she had me as an addict mom, and now she just wants to see that I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I had to do I done the same thing with my dad.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle some days, but I know eventually she'll see that I'm really doing what I say I'm doing.
Yeah.
And not just BSing her.
Yeah.
And telling her stuff what she wants to hear. All I ever do anymore is work and go home, go to my meetings. And the people that I have in my life now are so much different. Like I thought my addict friends cared about me, and they didn't. Like I had one friend through my addiction that I'm still best friends with now, and they're in recovery too. And so it's different with my recovery family now.
Yes.
And my church family. That was another thing. Like I didn't have my relationship with God. I was angry with God for a lot of things. But this last jail stay, a lot of it was more me than it was God. I was angry with myself. I couldn't forgive myself.
It's easier to blame God sometimes, isn't it, than accept our responsibilities.
That, and my thing was I couldn't see how he could forgive me because I couldn't forgive myself.
Mm-hmm.
So how can he forgive me for it? And now my relationship with God is on a whole nother level. I get to go to church with my kids. I get with my mom, my stepdad,
Isn't that a great feeling?
Yeah. I've got a family out here that's not my blood family, that even if I'm just having a bad day or if I'm sad, I can call and be like, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. And don't get me wrong, I know relapses happen, and I pray that I don't relapse ever again, and I'm going to do everything I can not to. But there's other people out there that do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I just want them to know that even if they do relapse, it's okay. I've had a couple of friends that have relapsed, and like I've told them, it's not about what you do with that relapse. It's not about the relapse. It's about what you do after the relapse.
Yes, and sometimes those relapses can be the catalyst for the final comeback.
Yeah. Because I've relapsed many times, and but I feel like there's something completely different this time. Like I've worked through things that I never would have worked through.
Oh, you've done a lot of healing work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I should have talked to people when I was younger. I should have told things. I should have told how I was feeling, whatever. But I didn't. And that's my biggest thing today that I tell people is, especially like when I was still in jail, we talked to juveniles a lot. And my thing was talk to somebody.
That is great advice. Great advice. And I can remember when you started opening up in the jail, like you could just see the release coming off of you. And she shared. I thank you so much, Desiree, for coming on today. You've shared your vulnerability in it, but it is a beautiful, beautiful story. And I know that the world can't always see all the pieces, but being on the sidelines and watching it has been absolutely amazing. Watching God put these pieces back together, restoring your family, restoring your job, restoring, like getting to a place that you can love yourself and start to believe in yourself, and you're getting the car, you're doing all the things, and that's exciting. I remember when you drew that out on your this one program, that you drew it out, and you looked at me and you said, I'm gonna have this life one day. And I knew then there's something changing there. She's doing that, and I'm watching you. So I'm so proud of you. I'm so grateful that you came on the show today. Thank you guys for watching. And if you're out there, somebody who's struggling in the trenches and they're just trying to find their way out, send them this episode, because let it inspire hope that just get up and try again. One more time, get up again and keep going. So you are watching The Way to Break Free on Bold Brave TV. Like and subscribe so you'll be notified when we go live next week, and we'll see you then.
This has been The Way to Break Free with your host, Angela Pedigo. The one thing Angela attributes her personal victories to is her relationship with God and her deep faith. Tune in each week and hear stories and testimonies of people in personal and professional trenches and how they overcome them with their own faith in God. The Way to Break Free has something for everyone, everywhere. Right here, Wednesdays, noon Eastern on the Bold Brave